Lucy felt Martha's firm hand gripping her arm and shaking her. "No then, you've slept long enough. Who do you think you are, a sleeping beauty? You can come down and help me with breakfast, and tomorrow you'd better set an alarm clock." Lucy groaned as she sat up, not just because she was desperately tired after the night's exertions, but also because the rough awakening confirmed that it was still 1940, and she had no idea how they were going to get back to their own time. The boy's awakening was no gentler. "Boy, get up!" shouted Joe, banging on the barn door with a shovel. He then opened the door slightly and allowed the sheepdog that was following him to rush in. If Robert hadn't been woken by the loud noise, he certainly would have been by the experience of his face being licked by a sheepdog with extremely bad breath. The first meal was definitely a learning experience. Hot from her exertions, Lucy asked, "Is there any water to drink?" Ned was swigging from a tankard of ale at the time and spluttered into it with laughter. "I don't know what part of the country you come from, lass. I know you say some strange things, but you can't drink the water round here, or in London for that matter. It will kill you. You can stay away from this stronger ale too. You have the small beer. That should do the trick. Water is for washing things in. Ale is for drinking." The midday meal was bread, cheese and cold meat, but in the evening a hot meal was served, and it was James's turn to be nearly caught out. He had carried over a large iron cauldron of stew and set it to heat over a fire. When the actors returned from the stage area, Ned lowered himself to the ground, complaining of an aching back, and called out to James, "Boy, put some pottage on a trencher for me. My back's too sore to move." James looked at his sister in panic. He had no idea what he was being asked to do. Was a trencher some kind of ointment for Ned's back? "Do you think this is really it?" asked Lucy nervously. The building on the corner, the one with the street sign, had been grand and newly built. The house they were standing in front of now looked quite different. It was a detached 3-story building, but it didn't stand straight. Instead it seemed to lean and twist and slump. It was dirty, and there were black and green mouldy streaks down the front caused by leaking gutters. In a few of the windows the glass was cracked, and one was boarded up. However, the number 74 scratched into the peeling paintwork of the front door told them this had to be the right place. Timidly, the Baxters walked up the steps, knocked on the door, and waited. They were just about to knock again when the door opened, and they were face to face with a woman in an old faded black dress. Robert, James and Lucy jumped back in fright. Lucy suppressed a squeal. The scary lady was carrying a long knife. "Yes, what do you want?" "Excuse me," said Robert, a slight tremor to his voice. "Our uncle said he had booked us a room here." A broad smile came over the woman's face. "Oh, I was wondering when you'd get here," she said. "He come round yesterday, he did. What was his name again? Albert, I think. Yes, Albert. He paid for 2 weeks up front. Come in. Oh, don't mind me waving this knife about. I was just cutting up some mutton for a stew." Sarah guided Lucy in the direction of a gangplank where women and children were boarding. They fell in behind a well-dressed family, the mother wearing a hat decorated with bright blue feathers. A porter was pulling a cart piled high with luggage. Without drawing attention to herself, Sarah added her case to the load and, putting her finger to her lips to indicate that Lucy should be quiet, she urged Lucy to put her case on the cart too. Lucy and Sarah filed up the gangplank. It was far from an orderly procession, as children were playing underfoot. Occasionally a passenger struggled down against the traffic flow to have one last hug with a family member standing on the quayside. At the top of the gangplank was a naval officer who was checking off people against a list. Lucy and Sarah had almost reached him when, to Lucy's surprise, Sarah began jumping up and down, waving and shouting in a voice that seemed somehow younger than her natural voice. "Mother, Mother, we're here! We're coming!" Then she grabbed Lucy's hand, and they wriggled in and out of the queuing passengers until, with Sarah still shouting, "Coming, Mother!" They shot past the man with the list, who started to protest, but by then they were gone. From that moment, Sarah and Lucy became passengers of the SS Great Britain. Robert and James gambled that it would be another dry night and decided to sleep outside again. They were the only ones beside the bonfire. The novelty of sleeping under the stars had probably worn off for the rest of the Rainbow people. 4 people who were not asleep were the 2 founders of the movement, Stella, Steve and Sunbeam Sue, who were joined by Pete and the rabbit. "I'm very worried," said Stella Steve. "I'm getting bad vibes." "Yeah, man, I feel them too," echoed the rabbit. "It's more real than just vibes," said Sunbeam Sue. "We've had a letter, hand-delivered. This place has been sold. Our days here are numbered. They're planning to evict us." "There's more," added Stella Steve. "I've got a friend. 5 days a week he's stuffed into a suit and works at the council, but at the weekends he's one groovy guy. He says the social workers are going to make a move too. We risk losing the house and the kids." "What can we do?" asked Pete. "I think we've got to protect the kids first and foremost. If the establishment takes them off us and puts them into care, it might be really hard to get them back," said Sunbeam Sue. "You've seen that film with Steve McQueen, The Great Escape, haven't you?" asked Stella Steve. "Cool. I've never dug a tunnel before," said the rabbit. "Or do I get to jump over the fence on a motorbike?" "Nope. Apart from the fact that there isn't a fence and we haven't got a motorbike. I mean, we need another way out."